Born of grandiose ambition, the RMS Titanic was designed to be the largest, most luxurious, and technologically advanced ship of its time. The Titanic measured 269 meters long, 28 meters wide, and approximately 53 meters high from the hull to the top of the funnels. Its weight was approximately 46,000 tons, 1,328 tons, considered colossal by the standards of the time. In total, the ship had 840 cabins and 9 decks, 7 of which were accessible to passengers. Its capacity was 2,435 guests and 892 crew members, totaling an occupancy of up to 3,327 people on board. The Titanic's design was part of a White Star Line strategy to compete with the Cunard Line, which dominated the Atlantic routes. Construction of the ship officially began in 1909, with the laying of the ship's foundation on March 31st of that year at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, Ireland. The ship was launched on May 31, 1911, and its official inauguration took place on April 10, 1912, when it began its only and tragic voyage. The estimated construction cost was $7.5 million at the time, equivalent to hundreds of millions today, adjusted for inflation. The Titanic was part of the Olympic class, consisting of 3 planned ships: Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Unlike modern cruise ships, the Titanic was not classified by categories such as luxury or standard, but rigidly divided into 3 social classes. First class was reserved for the world's elite, millionaires, aristocrats, and businessmen, and offered the highest level of comfort and service with spacious cabins and luxurious furnishings. Second class was geared towards the educated bourgeoisie and professionals, while third class, known as stage, was occupied by immigrants and workers seeking a new life in the Americas. This social division accurately reflected the structures of the time and was crucial to survival rates during the sinking, as access to lifeboats was more difficult for lower-class passengers. The Titanic had two sister ships. The first, the RMS Olympic, was launched in 1910 and had a long and successful career, carrying passengers for over 2 decades until being retired and broken up in 1935. The third ship in the class, the HMH Britannic, was converted into a hospital ship during World War I. It sank in the Marge in 1916 after striking an underwater mine, but fortunately with far fewer casualties than the Titanic, thanks to safety improvements implemented after the 1912 tragedy. Among the technical curiosities that fascinate to this day is the use of 3 giant propellers and 29 coal-fired boilers, which allowed the Titanic to reach a top speed of approximately 23 knots, or 42 kilometers per hour. Its hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments, and it was believed that even if up to 4 of them were flooded, the ship would remain afloat, fueling the false belief that it was unsinkable. The ship also had 4 funnels, though only 3 were functional. The fourth was aesthetic, designed to add visual grandeur. Internal engineering included ventilation systems, electrical power, and elevators and plumbing, very advanced for the time. Even with all this innovation, the Titanic carried only enough lifeboats for about half of its occupants, a decision based on outdated standards and overconfidence in its invulnerability. A symbol of British engineering and pride in the early 20th century, it was advertised as unsinkable, a floating feat that represented the pinnacle of transatlantic navigation. Her maiden voyage, departing Southampton on April 10, 1912, bound for New York, became one of the most iconic tragedies in maritime history, when the Titanic collided with an iceberg and sank in the icy waters of the North Atlantic in the early hours of April 15, claiming more than 15 lives. However, beyond the tragedy, the Titanic remains to this day a landmark of naval engineering, an example of how innovation, ambition, and human limitations can meet the unpredictability of nature. The Titanic's legacy goes far beyond its sinking. It represents a milestone of technical excellence, human ingenuity, and, at the same time, humility in the face of the forces of nature. Her sinking led to a complete overhaul of international maritime safety regulations, including the creation of SOLAS, the International Convention for the Safety of Human Life. To this day, the Titanic continues to inspire engineers, historians, filmmakers, and curious observers around the world. Beyond its grandeur, the Titanic was packed with technical details and personal stories that continue to amaze researchers more than a century later. For example, the ship used high-quality coal mined in Wales and shipped over 5,800 tons for its maiden voyage. Daily consumption hovered around 600 tons, requiring the continuous work of a team of over 150 stokers and coal handlers who operated under extreme temperatures, in exhausting shifts, in one of the most hostile environments on board. The ship also pioneered the use of large-scale electric generators with 4 dynamos totaling 400 kilowatts, powering lights, elevators, ventilation, telegraphy, and even the cabin call system. This was a first for 1912. Interestingly, the Titanic also had its own telephone exchange with 50 internal lines, something unprecedented for the time, allowing communication between the ship's prime and operational areas. Another peculiarity was the presence of a printing press on board that printed a daily newspaper called the Atlantic Daily Bulletin, featuring telegraph news, sports scores, and internal announcements distributed to first-class passengers. This reflected the White Star Line's level of sophistication and desire to replicate life on dry land, even on the high seas. The Titanic also carried a surprising amount of cargo, in addition to the passengers' luggage. There were over 3,000 bags of mail, dozens of automobiles, including a Renault-type CB coupe, made famous in the 1997 film, as well as boxes of pheasant eggs, tins of skulls, works of art, and even stained glass pianos, demonstrating that its function was also as a commercial and cultural transport between continents. Among the passengers were eccentric and unknown figures with remarkable stories, such as Japanese Masabumi Osono, his country's sole survivor, who upon returning to Japan was publicly condemned for cowardice for having survived. A reflection of the rigid samurai code of honor still present in the culture of the time. Our chambermaid Violet Jessup, who not only survived the Titanic but had also served on the Olympic and would survive the sinking of the Britannic years later, one of the most impressive stories of the Civil Navy. Another little mentioned fact is the psychological impact on survivors. Many crew members who escaped the sinking never returned to sea. Charles Lightloader, second officer, was the highest-ranking crew member to survive. He played a heroic role in rescuing passengers but would struggle with the trauma for the rest of his life. Interestingly, years later, he would participate in the evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II, commanding a civilian boat that saved British soldiers. It's also worth mentioning that ticket prices varied enormously. A third-class ticket cost around £7 to £9, while a first-class suite with a private dining room could exceed £870, equivalent to over £100,000 today. On board were passengers of 35 nationalities, making the Titanic a microcosm of the global society of the time. Even the ship's artifacts continue to amaze. Items salvaged in recent decades, such as porcelain, safes, letters, and still-sealed wine bottles, have withstood the test of time and the abysmal pressure of the ocean. Scientists are also fascinated by the field of extremophilic bacteria that are now slowly consuming the ship's hull, such as the bacterium Alamonas titanicae, named in its honor, estimating that the Titanic's remains will disappear completely within a few decades. More than a tragedy, it is a vivid reminder that even the grandest works can succumb when pride overcomes prudence. But also that in every rivet, hold, and roasting structure lay the spirit of an era that dared to dream big.